Hello, I'm Erin Marcus, founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business, and I want to welcome you to Ready Yet? If all you needed was a step-by-step plan of what to do, you could buy a book on how to succeed and you would be all set. But here's the rub. You'll never do what it takes until you become the person it takes to do it. The Ready Yet podcast is dedicated to those who are ready to become the person who succeeds, ready to become the person who steps into more, and ready to become the best version of themselves. In the I'm Ready interview series, join me for inspiring conversations with people who figured out who they needed to be in order to achieve their dreams, and were brave enough to be that person. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Ready Yet podcast, where I get so excited to introduce you to people who have figured out who they needed to be to get to where they wanted to be, right? So I'm very excited today to introduce you to Natalie Klun, because as we were recapping before we started, we kind of made like googly eyes across a crowded Zoom room at each other. Like, oh, I kind of like this person. Then we followed up, connect on LinkedIn, Facebook, all those, and like, here we are. So that's a lesson in and of itself.
Yes.
Go meet cool people, because now here we are. So why don't you give them a more formal introduction of who you are and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Natalie Klun. My background is sales. I've been in sales for over 20 years. I did not intentionally set out to be a salesperson. In fact, it's kind of funny. I'm literally the least competitive person you'll ever meet. And then I end up in like the most highly competitive industry. It's kind of funny when you really reflect.
It probably served you well, though. It's why you stood out, right?
Well, here I am almost 25 years later. So something was working, right? And I love what you set up for us as far as how we met, because that's really my mission. Like, I'm 100% focused on, first of all, how do we take the sell out of sales? And that means building relationships, focusing on relationships, realizing on the other end of the Zoom, on the other end of the Facebook post or message or whatever that is a human being. And we are all wired to connect for connection. And how do we use the online tools like social media in our business to be visible, to stand out, to find our people that we can serve and sell our services to, or our products, or whatever that is, or to get our message out into the world? And it really is something that I navigated myself. Like, first of all, I had to navigate how to be comfortable as a sales professional, how to really shed a lot of that really bad training that's out there me, that dehumanizes the sales process.
Yeah.
And then when social media became a part of our business, which it's no longer an option to be online, it's a necessity.
Yep.
And again, figuring out what is that magic formula, which I think I figured it out. I've got what I call the magnetic formula.
There you go.
And applying it for myself, and then going on and helping others to do so. So that's me.
I love what you're saying. And this is why, say what you will about Zoom, you can still feel the energy.
Oh.
You still feel someone else's energy, because so I had a marketing intensive for the last 2 days, and then I've been on calls with folks afterwards. And one of the things that I've been trying to explain to people is that business and sales, especially as an entrepreneur, we make this mistake where we think it's introduction, like you meet somebody, and then they buy from you. And what it really is introduction, engagement, potentially a prospect or a referral, and then a client. And it's exactly what you're talking about with using social media to continue the engagement piece.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm super fascinated with why we do what we do. So I
love it.
I love to deconstruct like what makes us do what we do, understand it, because to me, that's how we can lead with more empathy, how we can be more personable and be human and be social and be the things that we should be, versus these tactics and things that have been taught and told to a lot of us, that selling is a numbers game, or we've got to deploy these mass marketing strategies in order to be successful, when the reality is it's actually the opposite, right? Selling is,
Absolutely the
to
opposite.
me, being human and clearly communicating what it is that and how we can help, and making sure we're connected with the right people, and then getting ourselves to the position where we've demonstrated in such a way that our network self-selects in working with us.
Right.
So it's not like you're having you're not selling someone something, you're not talking them into doing anything.
Right.
You are literally just demonstrating and communicating in a way that makes them say, yes, this is what I need. Right.
And then it's just an invitation to take the next step.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when I do sales training for my clients and so I have a background in commercial real estate, in financial services. So very much what you were talking about, those old school tactics, drop you off in a high-rise office building in downtown Chicago, and you just go into every office. Who takes care of your real estate? Oh my God, like, first of all, I'm 5 feet tall. I had no business wandering around in a stranger's offices, right? This is not a good method. But what happens when people chase you? Right? You run away.
Run away. Absolutely. And it's like that whole idea too of like, if feeling the energy, like what you were saying earlier, even through Zoom or through social media, people can feel that energy. And I always say, when you show up, and let's talk about showing up on social media, for example, because the virtual world is a big part of growing our business and connecting. And I think we learned in 2020, one of the, I would say, positive things that came from it is how we can use these tools to be more productive, to give us an opportunity to connect with people that we would never have an
I
opportunity.
wouldn't have met you. I was presenting at a networking event that's in Maryland.
Yeah. And you're in
person, and I'm in Chicagoland.
And I'm in Salt Lake City. Like,
right.
Our paths would never have crossed. Very unlikely if it wasn't for these tools.
Yeah.
Right. And I always say, especially when it comes to social media, and I get it, there's this element of vulnerability when we put ourselves out on platforms that have literally millions. I think I read an article last week, 3.3 billion active worldwide users of social media. So here we are, we're putting ourselves out. It's very nerve-wracking to do so, because there is that other side of the equation where there's a lot of people out there that are very brave to be mean and hurtful behind the computer,
the anonymity of the keyboard.
But what we're actually doing when we're showing up consistently using tools like social media is our brains are wired to accept what is familiar and reject what is unfamiliar. So this is why when you connect with someone who you've never met and they instantly send you a sales pitch, that is why that is offensive. Like, right. whoa, slow down. I don't know you. Like, what do you mean? Like, it's that whole human design to lean into what is familiar and to lean back from what is not familiar.
Not even lean in, but literally identify as safe or unsafe.
Yeah, it's
that basic. It's safe, it's not safe.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Ready Yet podcast. I know I really enjoy having conversations about who you need to be in order to reach new heights. As founder and CEO of Conquer Your Business, I work with my clients at the intersection where what they need to do to succeed meets who they need to be to do it. If you would like to have a conversation about your business, please reach out to me at erin@conqueryourbusiness.com.
Exactly. So when you make those online connections and you show up in a way that is focused on building the relationship, and trust me, it moves very quickly because I think we've become more accustomed to these online relationships. When you approach it from that perspective, and then you do things like posting content that's helpful, video, telling stories, whatever that is, and you begin to become familiar to the people in your network, to the point where if you do a good job at demonstrating how you can help them, again, that's when they self-select. but it is more of a long-term strategy than it
Very much
is, like you said, just going and being dropped off. And I think it's so funny, financial services and real estate, that's my background too. I think that's
right.
another reason why the energy drew us to each other. But it's this very much trying to bypass the relationship building phase. And you can't, because we are wired as humans to connect. So,
well, and it's also why I tell a lot of my clients, for most of us, until you have a certain level of followers or a certain level of business, in order to be blunt enough to explain the difference, I always say, to me, social media is a credential, not a sales tool.
Yeah.
Like it's and I call it a credential, and I probably don't mean it in as clean a version of that word. And because I do agree with you, it's the get to know, like, and trust you part.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say it's like the appetizer.
Yeah.
Right. How do you show up regularly and really love talking about what you do, sharing, telling stories? It's kind of like a journal, but you share it with the world.
Yeah.
And you do so in a way knowing that the idea is to build relationships with those that you're connecting with, and not using it like, oh, I'm going to generate leads. I mean, the reality is no one wants to feel like a lead,
right?
And when you approach it as using it to generate leads, again, people can feel that energy. When you use it as a tool to be like, okay, I'm going to connect with people and I'm going to share things that are intended to be helpful, and I'm going to be super consistent, and I'm just going to have fun. Again, people feel that, and they respond
want to be with you,
differently.
kind of. Right.
Yeah.
You're the happy person at the party. They want to be. So 99% of the time when I have these interviews, I really love getting into people's personal stories.
Yeah.
And we'll do that. But I have another question for you.
Okay.
Because I got you here. And I have something I've been talking to my clients about lately. And I'd love to get your opinion on this.
Okay.
Because in the world of social media, so I'm a business person. I was in sales and marketing, corporate. I'm also like you. I have that background where I was in a male dominated field in the 80s and 90s, where I was, not only was I the minority, I'm a small woman. So like there were these big guys with dark suits on and little old me. And so I was always taught I had to come from a place of confidence. And there's all these people out, the influencers kind of make it a little extreme, but as a business owner, how do you balance showing up in your best light? Because if you don't display confidence in what you do, your clients are going to believe you can do it either, but that's not lying. And then include in that vulnerability. And I don't, I'm not saying this the right way, but you also watch some people take it to the other extreme.
Yeah.
Where not the sharing of true difficult times band together, we watch miraculous connections being made, but the woe is me consistency.
Yeah.
No, because where do you balance not lying, showing up in your best light, being vulnerable, but not slipping into woe is me?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think that's a great question. And I think the balance is one, in my opinion, and through my journey as a salesperson who had to navigate and learn, and like you said, in a male dominated industry, when I started, I was selling real estate investment to retirees in the Las Vegas area. And I was constantly having to overcome my age.
Yeah.
They're looking at me like, who are you?
Retirees.
Give me, And I had a really, really competitive sales manager. So it's not like I had team support. And then again, I'm just not a competitive person.
Remind me later to ask you how you managed to say yes to taking on that job.
I know, right? Right. Well, I can tell you the answer to that question. I was checking off the boxes. I was going to school at UNLV. I was working full time. I was doing all of the things that you're supposed to do, right?
Yep.
And so when I say I kind of just stumbled into sales, and I think there is a part of me that it comes natural for me, but I learned that later on in my career. And then I made different choices, which is what's led me to where I'm at today in doing what I do. But the balance between confidence and then not being over sherry, woes me type thing is this. I feel like in all of our journeys, we've solved problems for ourselves that we can then go on to help others do so. So that's why they always say, like, find someone who's a few steps ahead of you and follow in those footsteps, right?
Absolutely.
So having that confidence that you've been through something, you've had an experience, you've learned from it, you've figured it out, and you figured it out in such a way that you now are like, oh, okay, I can help others do the same.
Mm-hmm.
People want to have someone, it's kind of like going to the doctor. There was that AT&T commercial. I don't know if you remember, where the doctor came in and he's like, guess who got reinstated? And the patient's like laying in the bed and they're like, well, and he's like pretending like this is, something that he hasn't done. And could you imagine having that experience where your doctor is unsure of their ability to perform a surgery? So you have to have that confidence in being able to help lead someone through whatever it is that you're helping them get through. So when we do share, there is vulnerability in that experience, but we have to show how we got on the other side of that. And if we stay too much in the downside of it,
struggle.
Yeah. People are going to have a hard time seeing you as that person, that authority, that expert that's going to help them get through the trench, right?
And, piggybacking on that, and I have made the conscious decision that I use Facebook, for example. I'm of the age where we're talking to each other on Facebook, right? For my business. It doesn't mean I never put personal stuff on there, but a lot of the people that I meet out in the world for my business, I also become Facebook friends with them.
Yep.
And so that carries over.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I don't look like I have my shit together over here on my personal side, who is going to think I have it over here on my business side?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and 100% social media, same for me. I use it more for business than I share personal, but I also do recognize, and when I do show up and I share something personal, it's because I really feel drawn to share it. I'm not sharing, what I had for breakfast and where I'm going for dinner. I'm not that type of sharer.
Yeah. I think we talked about this. I grew up in Chicago public schools in the 70s and 80s. I spent the first 20 years of my life making sure no one knew what I was doing. My mother will attest to that, right? Her constant complaint was, you're never where you said you were going to be. I had a really hard time. It's just very weird to me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's some people that they share a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm like, wow, I wish I could be more of a sharer in that sense, but I just don't. But when I do, it means something has really stood out, or I've made a conscious effort to be like, okay, this is something that I think would be of value, and also show kind of that human side, because I think there's this other element. Like, let's talk on the other side of the equation, where there's someone that is an expert and they're really accomplished and they've have a large following or whatever that is. Those people oftentimes, at least for myself, when I would look at them and what they've accomplished, it's hard for me to relate. I don't see myself
too
in
far
them.
ahead. Right.
Yeah. Like, oh, that would be nice, but they're somewhat on a pedestal.
Right.
And then there's something in the back of my mind that
they're other.
The self-limiting self, and we all have, that says, yeah, right, but you could never be that.
Right.
And so I think there is also that balance to make sure that we can connect and be relatable in the sense that we can help people overcome or accomplish whatever it is that we've done for ourselves. And again, to me, it was really getting comfortable in sales and what it means to be a salesperson. That was a journey that I went through, that I overcame. And then I was able to, in my real estate business, help my agents and, use what I learned to help them avoid some of the things that I had to go through. And then now bringing social media into the equation, that was something in the beginning I really struggled with incorporating this tool into my business. Like shiny object is a very real thing.
Very, yeah.
Social media puts comparison mode on steroids. It seems like everybody and their dog is doing what you're doing. So it seems like
a very crowded marketplace.
Yeah. So how
that
do you
was my
stand out?
story. That was one of the things when I started this business, and I've been helping other people build businesses in one way or another for over 20 years. And yet when I know too many coaches, I know too many coaches, and it makes you feel that.
Well, and there really is such a thing that when something comes into your awareness, then all of a sudden you start to see it.
Right.
Everywhere.
The reticular activating system kicks in.
Yeah.
Shows it
and that is so true on social media, because then you feel, and that can prevent people from showing up. And what really helped me and how I was able to overcome that, and I still to this day struggle with the consistency piece, because one, we're busy. We're busy running your business. We're busy delivering our services, and social media in itself and building an online network is a big job. So I don't claim to be, I've got this dialed down perfectly and look at me, everything's perfect. I'm in there with you, and we're going to do this together. And for me, what has always served well in my business has been my connections, my relationships, and my network. And when I took that from my pre-social media and began to apply it to my social media, and this is where the magnetic formula came into play, I then started to use it differently in a way that served me and served my business, and then allowed me to actually enjoy using it in a way that hyper focused on those quality relationships versus using it as a marketing tool. No one likes to feel marketed to.
Right.
Using it as a lead generation tool. No one wants to feel like a lead. And really using it as a relationship building, business building tool.
And I was teaching this marketing intensive, and I was trying to explain the difference between a passive strategy and an active strategy. And I put social media in both sides. Because just posting on social media is a completely passive strategy. Interacting on social media is an active strategy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people struggle with it being, it is time consuming, that they then, this is something I need to outsource. And oftentimes what I hear a lot is someone will say, well, I hired a social media manager, or I hired a company to do my posting for me. I never really saw any results from it. And then I'll go and do an audit. And then I come back and I say, well, there was one thing that was very important that was missing. And they're like, what?
You.
You, that's who they want to connect with.
It's like you and I are the same. I being able to speak in somebody else's voice is not an easy skill.
No.
It is, and that's why the VA approach to managing someone's social media doesn't produce sales. And the other thing is managing the expectations.
Yeah, I think so.
What did you think was supposed to happen?
Yeah.
With them working with you? And did they do the work to find out who you're talking to? And what are we supposed to be telling them?
Well, and that's really the basis of what I developed my service around, is to provide that training resource to my client so they have that qualified support that keeps them front and center with their social content posting strategy. I don't like to use the word content marketing, it's content posting strategy, but they still have to do their part in doing the interacting. The whole objective is to minimize the amount of time that is spent in that daily interaction, just getting into the habit of it. But then also too, how do we create a content posting strategy that has them front and center? And the basis of the service that I provide is that training resource and training their admin support to make sure that they have the qualified support. Now, yeah, there's some infrastructure things that we have to put in place. Just to give some context, like the magnetic formula is a 3-part formula. The first is your impression. What is the impression that you're making? What's that memorable first impression? So how do we position yourself online to connect with the right people, and how to invite them to come into your world? The second part is the interaction. Like you said, this is more of the active. How do you have a daily networking plan that allows you to enhance the relationships you already have, but also move the new relationships forward?
That's what I tell people. It's 50-50.
Yeah.
It's about getting people into your world and re-engaging with people who are in your world.
Absolutely. And then the third part is the influence phase, which is the content posting strategy that has you as the service provider, or as the person that needs to build relationships with your network front and center. And then the qualified support that is behind you, making sure that everything is prepared in such a way, considering we have 3 seconds or less to capture someone's attention, using all of the different ways that people consume content. Some watch videos, some read articles, some like the quick snippet posts. How do we build your influencer library that isn't super time consuming? And again, it was solving a problem for myself, recognizing that I'm not the only one in this boat. And then how can I go and help others apply that in their business?
And what you're talking about is one of the big mistakes. It's the solution to one of the big mistakes I watch entrepreneurs make.
Right.
And I just phrase it this way. They don't do the work.
No, it's too overwhelming.
The work, they think, it sounds, let's face it, what you just said sounds like a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But to that effect, what I would ask folks to think about is that a lot of work, or is posting on social media for 3 years, having not done it right, isn't that more work?
It's a waste of time. Well, and this is what I always say to someone is I say, look at the relationship you have with your existing client base, or take your favorite client, for example, or take your significant other. Would those relationships have advanced to where they are if you just handed it off to someone else, right? Or you just got overwhelmed with the whole relationship in itself and ignored it, right? And so you have to think that there is effort that goes into these very, very important relationships in your personal life and in your business. And how do you set yourself up? And that's why I look at it truly as an online networking system. Absolutely. And there's all of these conversations out there that make it like, super easy. I call it mass marketing strategies.
Well, I call it just do this one thing.
Yeah. And it's the consistency of that one thing over a long term where you then begin to have a nurtured network and you get results. But there's this myth that is out there that there's these overnight successes. Right. Anyone who has high level of success, I promise you it was not overnight, and they will tell you that themselves. And the other thing too is you have to have this large following in order to be successful. So then we try to, again, do those tactics that bypass the relationship building phase. We're trying to automate it.
We try to press an easy button.
And it's funny, like going back to what we were talking about and just like dissecting what humans do. We are always looking for the easy button. Hence the diet pill or diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Hence the beauty industry. I mean, we're looking
for one product that, cleans your skin, moisturizes, and provides the base makeup all in one, right? The more things you can put into the one product, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question for you. Just to wrap it back up with your personal story.
Yeah.
So I think, like me, your sales positions were in companies and for other people. So how did you get, I always ask it this way, did you jump off the cliff into entrepreneurship or were you
100%.
pushed?
Yeah,
Were you
no,
pushed?
I jumped because again, my first, in fact, my first, and I shared this about having a very competitive sales manager. And when I was getting ready to leave that company, and I was basically pushed out the door because she was just so competitive and she wanted to be the shining star. She should have never been in a management position, right? And I remember when I left that company, I said, I'm never going to put myself in a position again where I feel so unvalued, where I feel like I have to compete within my own team. And that's when I went on my own.
Nice.
And I transitioned. It was still in the financial services, but then I took the leap fully into real estate. And I had a real estate and a property management company for 15 years.
That's right, because I did that too.
Yeah. I specialized in community development. And when I got to a place in that with that company, and it was in a company that cycled, the market cycled really often and really hard. And the last time it cycled, I said to myself, okay, I don't want to be in a position again, even though I've been a business owner at that point now, like well over 20 years. I don't want to be in a position where I'm in an industry or a market that I feel that when something happens, it's completely out of my control. So then I'm like, okay, what's my next move? And that's when I said, I want to have an online business. I want to be able to be anywhere in the world. As long as I have an internet connection, I'm able to conduct business. And so 3 or 4 years ago is when I made that transition. And then of course, when COVID hit, I'm like, oh, thank God I did, because I felt like I was in the driver's seat still. And that's when I had a lot of my clients who were on the fence about being online come in. Now they're in panic mode, like, oh my gosh, okay, we see why we need to be doing this. But then they were kind of behind and playing catch up. And so part of my mission is to help people fully be in their driver's seat. Like one of the things that I particularly like to focus on and what I like to help people with is transition through what I would call a reinvention. So whether you've been in a certain industry for a certain amount of years and you want to now position yourself as a personal brand, or you want to reinvent how you're presenting yourself to the world, or for those who are like, I'm ready to jump off the cliff and dive straight into entrepreneurship, help them through that reinvention phase. So I do like to incorporate the services that and really what I can provide to help people reinvent themselves so they're living on their own terms.
Yeah, I love that. I had a similar thing. The first business I owned was geographic based. It was affected by a low barrier to entry and socioeconomic situations that I had no control over. Yeah. And it went from a lot of fun and really cool to banging my head against the wall. And I had the same epiphany. I want to be more in control. I want to be completely mobile.
Yeah.
And to your point about the transitioning, which I love, it was easier for me anyway, because I didn't know you. Maybe if I knew you then it would have been different. It was easier for me. I basically left my entire world behind.
Yep.
Because it was so hard. I had that business for 6 years to get my network to understand what I did, that I found it easier to find an entirely new group of people than to change what they knew about me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think part of it too, and we're in an age now that I think it is more acceptable to be, in a sense, unapologetic about who we are.
Yeah.
And there are more and more of us are seeking the balance between being successful and also being fulfilled. Because like I shared earlier, I've checked off all the boxes. And when I was in the midst of having my real estate company, even though I was having a lot of success, there was still something in me that felt like there was a void. I didn't feel that fulfillment that I think when you invest the amount of time in building a career or building a business, and if you still feel drained and you don't feel like you're getting something from it. And I think that's just part of like that mentality of pushing through. But we're now coming into an age where it really is more acceptable to have the best of both worlds, right? And it was hitting these walls in different parts of my career that made me be like, okay, what can I do
How do I need to do something differently?
Yeah, bring the two together.
So if someone wants to continue this conversation and gain access to the amazing insights that you have for social media and sales and everything else, and they're listening instead of watching the video and grabbing the show notes, what is the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn.
Right.
I am a LinkedIn nerd. I love it. I think it's a fun platform to hang out on. So LinkedIn, Facebook's another one that I spend time on, Instagram, or my website. And it's all my name, Natalie Klun. It's Klun. So if you just type in my name, it will pop up. And I love getting requests and messages and just connect with me. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a Zoom coffee. I love those sort of connections. So absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insight. I know people are going to get so much out of this conversation. So thank you for spending time with me.
Well, thanks, Erin, for having me. I really enjoy knowing you and hanging out with you. So this was fun.
Eventually we get to do it in real life.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Ready Yet podcast. I get so motivated by the amazing accomplishments of the remarkable people I meet, and I'm excited to be able to share some of their stories with you. You can find more episodes of Ready Yet at your favorite source for podcasts or at conqueryourbusiness.com. And if you've already decided that you are ready to become the person you need to be to achieve your big goals, feel free to reach out to find out how I can support you in your efforts. Or check out the Work with Erin page on the Conquer Your Business website. I also invite you to share this podcast with anyone you know who loves to learn and be inspired. And if you're so inclined, I'd be absolutely grateful for any reviews you'd like to share as well. Thanks again for joining me. This has been Erin Marcus, hopefully inspiring and helping you to go conquer your big dreams.